Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we'll be covering Excel VBA conditional statements. So by now, you should be familiar on how to set a value to a certain cell, and we've also covered the arithmetic functions on Excel VBA. You should also be familiar by now on the general structure of a subprogram and how to sort of define it yourself. But oftentimes in practical scenarios where you code, um, there are situations where you might have to take different pathways in the program depending on a certain variable. So, say for example, you have a program that you're trying to code, and the subprocessors that you're defining depends on the value of range A1. So range A1 here, you have range A1 here, and then if it's equal to 1, we have to do process steps 1 and process steps 2. But if by any case the range value is not equal to 1, then we have to do a separate process step, which is process step number 3 in this example. So how would you go about implementing this, and how would you go about coding this? Normally, what we covered so far can be achieved through Excel macro recorder. But now, what we're covering today in this lesson can never be coded, or rather, can never be recorded through the Excel macro recorder function. So, this is the general structure of a if condition. So, what we saw earlier was given a certain condition, our program is going to branch out into different processes depending on that condition. So the syntax, or how we implement this on code, is given here. So we have the normal subroutine program structure, and then encapsulated in the middle is a if statement, and the if statement takes in one argument, and that argument is the condition to be checked. So that condition can be anything. So say for example, it can be, you might be comparing one value against another, whether it's greater than or equal to. If that condition is true, found to be true, then this block of code is going to execute. And if that statement is not true and the opposite is true, then this block of code is going to execute. It's also worth mentioning that this else block of code, that's this line and else line, and the process if condition is false line, is optional. So say for example, you can just have if condition then, and process if condition is true, and then end if. Basically, you're not defining what to do if the opposite is true, and that is perfectly fine. You can go ahead doing that. But what I want to point out is that else statement is optional. So moving on, let's see how we can relate this to our previous example. So here, what we're saying is we are going to evaluate range A1 value, and then if by any case it equals to 1, we have to set the range C3 value to range A1 plus range B1 value. And also we have an additional step. If it's equal to 1, we have to say range D1 equals a positive result. And if by any case the range A1 value is not equal to 1, then we have to say range D1 is equal to negative result. So let's see how we can implement this in code. So how it's going to work is we are going to say public sub. So subprogram name can be anything. You can name it anything you want, and you have the general structure of the sub program here, and then encapsulated in the middle, like in the previous example, we have the if statement, and the if statement, the condition clause checks if the range A1 value is equal to 1. So if range A1 value equals to 1, then it's going to execute the block of code that's right above, or rather, right in the middle of the if statement and the else statement. So that is, it's going to set range C1 value equals range A1 value plus range B1 value, and range D1 value equals positive result. So you should be familiar with the process statements in the process section of the uh, if statement by now. And if you're not, I encourage you to go through the previous videos. If the range A1 value does not equal to 1, if it's any other value than 1, then it's going to not execute this um, portion of code, but rather it's going to execute range D1 value equals a negative result. That's all. So it's going to basically skip these two lines of code above. And same scenario, if range A1 value equals 1, then it's not going to execute range D1 value equals negative result. So that's about it for today's lesson. Um, you can try this code on the VBA code editor and see. If you haven't already subscribed to our channel, please subscribe, and we'll meet again with another lesson where we'll be getting into more detail on this conditional statements with logical operators. Thank you.